Welcome to another edition of Wallet Max Planet Positive podcast. I'm Bhuva Shakti, based in New York, and the founder of Wallet Max. We are a global community of startups, investors, and executives focused on increasing sustainable funding access, especially in climate tech, fintech, deep tech, and AI sectors. We interview one impact investor every month for our podcast. We invite them to share their background, but more importantly, what differentiates them from the crowd? How do they prioritize impact along with profits and planet? We deep dive into their personal and professional journeys and their mission to uplift. Today, we are speaking with Renata, an investor at Pivotal Ventures, a Melinda French Gates company, where she backs women led venture capital funds and makes mission aligned early stage investments. Renata has spent over a decade bridging the finance and social impact sectors and having held roles in microfinance, investment banking, social enterprises, and venture capital. Most recently, she served as a consultant with the New Capitalism Project and an investor at Nairobi-based KawiSafi Ventures, where she focused on the clean energy space. Renata is passionate about increasing access to capital for diverse GPs and founders and building a bench of future capital allocators who reflect the changing demographics of the US. Let me now hand over to Renata and invite her to say a few words about her background and career path. Over to you, Renata.
Thanks for that lovely introduction, Bhuva. It's such a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me and looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you. Give us a little bit of what's your professional background and career path. What do you think is your unique secret sauce today? And where was the pivotal moment in your life that has led you here?
Yeah, thank you. I think due to some of my lived experience, I don't know if you would call it a secret sauce, but my differentiated perspective or lens through which I do the work really comes from the way in which I grew up bridging different cultures, different socioeconomic classes, and even different countries. I grew up in poor and working class neighborhoods. Then I spent my summers in Ecuador with my dad's side of the family. And at the same time, I was on scholarship attending an elite private school. So there were a lot of contrasts, a lot of differences, and it made me really value diverse perspectives, value folks from different walks of life, different backgrounds. And it also just made me frustrated that I saw this inequity. I didn't have that vocabulary at the time, but I saw what I, probably called oh, this isn't fair or this isn't right. And all throughout high school and college, that was what was driving me. And I was looking for a career that would allow me to increase access, to increase opportunity. And in college, I had the opportunity to read a few books that talked about microfinance. This was the 2010s, early 2000s. And microfinance was a really popular tool that enabled entrepreneurs to have access to financial systems and financial products that historically they had been excluded from. So for me, that was a key pivotal moment that really showed me a tool, a product that would help me expand access to overlooked communities and entrepreneurs. So I think that's been my North Star. The work looks a bit different today, but I still see my role as a gate opener and really creating this access to capital that historically had been, dedicated to the select few.
Definitely, I can relate to the 2008-2010 time period. I was consulting for Lehman Brothers at that time when the financial crisis happened. I think when we came out of that, people were more conscious about financial inclusion than at any point in my lifetime, as I recall. So at Pivotal Ventures, you focus a lot on women-led venture funds. Why is that? And where do you see opportunities and challenges, especially early stage investments in the US market?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So for us, our focus on emerging managers is really about the opportunity and the gap. We see LP checks as a tool to ensure that a diverse group of people can control, access, and benefit from investment capital. One of the data points that underlies this thesis has been about the number of women check writers in the country, right? Most recently, the numbers have improved, granted, in the last decade or so, but the most recent data we have shows that at VC firms with 50 million and above in AUM, only 17% of the decision makers are women. So for us, it's about really making sure that a diverse cohort of investors has access and the right to make these decisions, with the hope that, if we address this gap, if we make sure a wide array of folks are at the table, we're going to be able to drive innovation. We're going to be able to unlock market rate companies that are able to drive social progress for everyone.
Yeah, I do recall.
Yeah,
Go
and more
ahead.
specifically, so we have a dual mandate. We invest in funds and LP, and we also do direct investing. So on the fund side, like I said, it's about getting capital in the hands of historically overlooked fund managers, and we've been doing that for almost a decade now. Our direct strategy is newer, but I would say similar goals. For us, the direct investing is more thematically oriented. We're investing in the care economy, we're investing in women's health, and our newest vertical is around financial access. But the same goal of advancing social progress remains. We're backing companies that are serving the 99%, companies that have impact built into the business model. So when the business scales and grows, naturally and inevitably, impact is also scaling.
Yeah, totally agreed. During the pandemic, we also saw this shift where less than 2% was going to women-led founders in terms of funding. And then as we came out of the pandemic, I was thinking probably it'll stay at 2 or maybe increase more than 2%. But very unfortunately, post-pandemic, the trend was much lower. Less than 1% women were getting funding. So it's two different areas of work which you highlighted, right? One is direct investment in women and underlooked communities in key areas that bring equity and inclusion, but more importantly, also enabling women-led, female-led, female-focused, and also underrepresented communities-focused funds. Because once they have funds, they have scaled the investment beyond our direct investment. So handling both sides in terms of investment funds and direct investment is the best way to go. But
Yeah,
also, if you see, yeah,
sorry, I was just going to underscore, for me personally, I think the pattern is clear, right? In microfinance,
yeah,
you're going out to rural communities, you're going to folks who were excluded from the traditional financial systems. So it's really about looking around and saying, who isn't able, whether they don't have the capital, they don't have the access, to launch the next big company, launch the next unicorn, and how can we empower them through investment capital to be able to innovate, to be able to scale their companies in a way that, just by virtue of their lived experiences, about their backgrounds, they're able to unlock a certain market need and drive social progress by way of growing their business.
yeah, exactly. So in the corporate world, there is this term called glass ceiling. It's for venture capital as well as female entrepreneurs as well, right? So
Yeah.
once you give them access and opportunity to be in the room and present their innovation and idea, then everything falls in line. But if
Yeah,
they don't even get the opportunity, we miss the innovation scaling communities, right?
exactly.
Totally agree. Yeah. But also, you see, there is a vast contrast today. Today's political landscape, not only in US but also globally, a lot of big corporations and private investors are shifting priorities. I mean, I would say it started since last year. It's very stark this year, and we think the trend is going to continue through the rest of the year. But based on your prior experience in microfinance and social impact sectors, why do you think still, even today, investing in mission aligned projects is important for the long term at Pivotal Ventures? And how do you balance profits and return on investment?
Yeah, I think the work is more important now than ever. I think
Mhm.
that, I'm in an investing role. I'm an allocator. So obviously I believe that one way to advance social progress is through the markets, right? To capitalize folks
Mhm.
who are building businesses. And like I said, where impact is intrinsic. So I don't like to think about them separate. For us, the impact is in who they're serving. We have a very strong focus on businesses that are serving the 99%. So we want mass market solutions that are helping everyday American families and businesses grow and scale. So I think that is crucial to the success of our economy. I think that's crucial to the success of this upcoming generation. I think it
Yeah.
has implications for all of us here in this country. And then to your other point about impact and profit, for us, first things first, they need to be profitable, right? We are investing for venture rate returns. We want to see these companies scale. We want to see these companies get to IPO. So that's number one. But like I said, I think it's important that we see the impact in the business model. So an example I can give you, and again, we haven't made any investments on the financial access front, but we're actively in diligence with folks and taking intro calls. So I'll make a plug for that. But on the financial access front, companies that are interesting to me, for example, are in the credit building space. So it's very clear when you talk to the founder, they'll tell me, oh, our average user has a 500 credit score. And that's a quantitative way for us to understand, oh, this business is targeting folks who want to build their credit, who want to increase their access to credit over the long term, whether it's to buy a house, buy a car, what have you. But just by virtue of who they're serving, it's an impactful company. And it's an impactful company that's going to make a lot of money and have a successful exit, hopefully, for the founder and for the investors. But just by virtue of who they're serving, how they're serving them, they're impactful.
Yeah, totally agreed. In terms of impact, it's not just an optional pillar, but it's inbuilt into the profits, right? So if you have a whole community that has better credit score, that can afford better homes, better credit for their education or for their families, then the whole community is thriving and uplifting, which means the businesses there are going to only generate better profits, if not the best, right?
Yep.
So with this example, I just also want to invite you to share some more case studies or examples of companies where you have invested personally or from Pivotal Ventures. How has success been for you?
Yeah, I think as an investor, success is when the folks you've backed are successful. So on the fund
Mhm.
side, that'll take some time. You know, it takes 7 to 10 years to understand the performance of a given fund. On the direct side, you get more feedback more quickly, of course, as funds are raised, subsequent funds are raised. But I think success comes from when I'm in my seat, success comes from helping a fund or a founder close their round, close their fundraise. It comes from helping them close a deal, make introductions to new LPs, new co-investors, help them raise a subsequent fund. So it's really about how we can be useful and helping set them up for success. A recent success, I'm going to claim it as a success for me and for our team, I think, was just last month, end of 2025, we came into the first close of a fund one. And I think that's when, for me personally, I'm most fulfilled and I feel like I am most successful at my job because we're coming in early. We are making a catalytic investment, an early bet where we can provide a signal to other investors that, hey, not only is this fund viable, but this fund has momentum. This fund is something that has investor appetite, you know? So being able to come in early and then we immediately partner with them. So we talk to the GPs, we're like, okay, we got your first close done. How can we help you get to the second close? What introductions can we make? How can we support you? What feedback can we provide to set you up for success? And I think that's where Pivotal is really unique and able to play a pivotal role in setting these funds up for success.
Congrats on closing the fund one. Even yesterday, I was talking to a couple of investors who are raising fund two when they have closed a fund one. And if there is momentum, if LPs are interested in investing in your fund, that's even a criteria for the market to have a positive outlook, right? It need not
Yep.
be just when there is positive outlook, there is momentum. Momentum can also drive positive outlook. So totally agreed, which is what exactly I heard in one of my conversations yesterday. But let us say you are not part of the insiders club. You are in an investing role. There is someone who is looking to become someone like you in an investing or a non-investing role. What advice or resources would you give them if they are not part of the traditional network?
Great question. And I, by no means was I part of the traditional network. I didn't know what VC meant or stood for until I got to business school. And even when I was applying to business school, I didn't have anyone in my network who had an MBA. So I was really starting from scratch on Google, how to apply to business school, you know? But being on the other side, I think there are tons of resources these days that are designed to help get young folks with diverse backgrounds into the venture industry. I'm a fan of the team at VC Unleashed, sorry,
Yeah.
and they have an excellent conference that I spoke at last year, and they're really targeting recent graduates, undergrad and MBAs, and helping equip them with the tools and resources to break into venture. For folks who are pursuing an MBA, there's an organization called Twigo. They have a life program that I highly recommend. Others, there's the NAIC, National Association of Investment Companies. They have a fellowship for women that I participated in a few years ago that I also highly recommend. So I'd say there's a cohort of nonprofits and fellowship programs that are really designed to help folks break in. And I've served as a mentor with some of these organizations in the past as well, and always want to refer folks. So I think it's easier now and more accessible, but there's still tons and tons of hurdles. So I understand how important it is to fund and support organizations like these that are helping folks break in.
Yeah, I met you at one of the VC Unleashed conferences last year
Oh
when
my
you
goodness,
were there.
yes.
Yeah, so I know Tanvi for a long time. They launched in New York and then they moved to San Francisco. But every year I'm either speaking there or meeting people like you there. So
Yeah.
hopefully another conference sometime this year we'll cross each other in person.
Yes, yes.
And so you mentioned there is a little bit more access and visibility today, and people like you can also help the younger generation, mentor them, refer them to resources so they don't have to start from scratch, right? But I also hear these days the younger generation is a little bit apprehensive of networking, talking to people in person, trying to pitch themselves. I don't know if you've heard something like that. Would you like to share some thoughts around that? If you know, if not, we can move to the next topic.
I can imagine that being the case. I hadn't heard it, but just given the recency of COVID and understanding that folks who were recently in college or started their careers during the COVID years, or all of our conversations are via Zoom, I can imagine it being harder to show up at the happy hour and go to the networking event. What I encourage folks is to really just take the leap, reach out. The worst that can happen is that someone doesn't reply. I really try, for example, to be on top of my LinkedIn DMs, especially when they're folks from a younger generation who are looking to break in, recent graduates. And I try to grab the coffee, I try to hop on a quick call. But I think it's one of those things where if you don't ask, no one's going to be able to help you. So again, the worst that can happen is that someone doesn't reply, which is not too bad. So I really encourage folks to just take the leap.
And do you have any networking tips for someone trying to get into your role? I know a lot of it is in the networking also to transition into an investing role like yourself.
Yeah, I think relationships matter. I think that building the relationships before you need to leverage them is key. So getting to know folks, offering help along the way. We recently hired for a role, and one of the most impressive applicants, in my opinion, was a woman who reached out. I don't know how she found my email, but she got creative. And she attached a deck talking about her recommendations, her investment thesis, how she could add value to Pivotal. It was maybe, I don't know, 5 to 10 slides, but just going the extra mile and demonstrating how she was ready to add value from day one helped her stand out from the crowd. So I think it's a lot about being proactive. It's a lot about demonstrating your value before it's needed or required. And again, taking the leap and being bold. And, you know, you're going to, when recruiting, when networking, trying to land a job, you're going to talk to or apply to 100 jobs to get one offer. That's just the nature of the game. But I think some of those tips can help folks position themselves well.
Yeah, long-term relationships not being transactional at the moment, but trying to add value. Those are all tips that will work in any sector, not just in venture capital and investing,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And in terms of experienced corporate professionals, let us say someone has had a mid to high level corporate career, more at the exec level, is it possible for them to transition into venture capital, be it investing or non investing roles? What would you advise?
Definitely. I think there's a lot of value in venture for folks with an operating background. And I think folks who are more experienced, have more of a network. I think the best way, in my view, in terms of like how they could break into venture is through venture partner roles, through angel investing, through scout programs. So I think these programs are really designed for folks who are mid-career and later, who have the network, have the access, and have the experience to add value to companies. So I think these roles naturally prepare you to become an investor. And there are things, being a venture scout, those are roles you can have while you're doing your full-time job. So you can be working in big tech, you can be working at a corporate, and then on the side be supporting a venture fund. And then after a year or two, you've developed a track record, you've made some recommendations that have gotten funded. I think that makes the story much more clear when you're trying to then recruit for a full-time venture role.
No, that's so true. You don't have to leave your full-time job. You can do something like scouting or venture partnering or angel investing on the side. When
Yeah,
advising and mentoring startups while
yeah,
you are
yeah,
advising and
exactly.
mentoring. Yeah,
To the earlier point about adding value, if you are an operator and you're adding value to a founder, that founder is going to go sing your praises to 5 other founders, and that's how you start to build your reputation as an investor.
yeah, exactly. And what do you think about investor relations roles? Is it more appropriate for early mid-career, mid-exec career, or for anyone? What are your thoughts on that?
I generally think that those roles in particular require a really strong network. So I would imagine that
Mm,
to be most successful, you're probably mid-career or later, because you need to be calling in a lot of favors, tapping your relationships that hopefully you've cultivated over time. And I think the skill set is quite different than the investing skill set, right? It's more, I would
yeah.
say, like a sales role where you're trying to demonstrate why a fund deserves capital from an LP. So I'd say it's a crucial role for sure, and we engage with IR people every day. But I see it as a different skill set than the investing role.
Yeah, totally agreed. It's more on the relationship side than on a quantitative investing side,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So I just want to also talk to you a little bit about some emerging trends you are excited about. I know there are some areas where you are doing direct investments and institutional fund investments, but what are the emerging trends you're excited about for 2026?
Yeah, so I think an emerging trend, well, for context, let me back up. At Pivotal, like I mentioned, we've been doing direct investing for some years now. But our most recent vertical that we added is in financial access. And I've been spending a lot of my time there, so I'm a bit biased. But some trends that I'm excited about are within the financial access space. We really, like I said, are looking to back companies that are serving the 99% and advancing social
Hmm.
progress. So within financial access, what does that mean, right? We're looking for companies that are helping families and small businesses access cash, access credit, and access insurance coverage. We recently partnered with the Holding Co. to do a survey of women across the country, and we were reminded about something that we all know inherently, that women are the primary decision makers when it comes to healthcare and when it comes to money matters. So
Yeah.
we see this as a huge opportunity. And on top of that, we see the appetite and demand from women. So women want to pay down their debt. 69% want to increase their savings and investments, and 77% are comfortable using AI to help manage their finances. So we know women are looking for these solutions. They're looking to use technology to help them advance their financial goals. And we're really hoping to build a portfolio of solutions that are addressing the needs of families and small businesses across the country.
Yeah, and because you mentioned AI, I really have to ask this question. Do you think we are in a hype or every company is using AI today? How do you differentiate where AI is the real driver of the core solution versus people have just added AI because, yeah, every company needs to be AI today?
Yes, I do think all founders need to be thinking thoughtfully of how to adopt AI, and I think particularly on the SMB side and even in consumer on the fintech side,
Hmm.
it's so important. Like margins are tight. It's so important to make sure that any expense that you're using with an engineering team, with AI, has to result in true value for the company. If it's not, if it's just something, superficial that makes your product look better, that's not really going to provide differentiation and empower you to scale over the long term. So I think being really, really thoughtful and, actually taking a step back and asking yourself, why are we adopting this tool? Is it
Mm-hmm.
truly helping our bottom line? Is it truly helping us unlock revenue? And that's how I would encourage founders to think about it. But again, it's required at this point, right? It's where we're moving,
Yeah.
it's where investment dollars are going. But I think it's so important to be thoughtful about how you're adopting it.
Yeah. With or without a hype or a bubble, your solution should need AI, then yeah, it's a valid solution. I think so. Yeah, right. And without sharing any confidential or sensitive data, I want to check in with you. What are some key elements of Pivotal's investment thesis, and how do you think you are uniquely positioned compared to other institutional funds, especially in the social and the environmental ecosystem?
Yeah, I think one thing that makes us unique is how we approach funding more broadly, right? We're set up in a way that we are able to deploy philanthropic capital and investment capital, and we're really
Mhm.
flexible. So we want to be able to leverage the type of capital that meets the need, that meets the moment. Um, and I think that's crucial. That flexibility is in our DNA and crucial to how we think about our strategy, both on the philanthropic side and on the investment side. On the investment side, as I mentioned, we're very market rate returns focused. So our thesis is rooted in the belief that there's money to be made by investing in overlooked funds and companies. And not only is there money to be made, but there's social progress to be had, right?
Yeah.
In terms of our investment thesis, I would say that on the fund side, we're sector agnostic. We believe that diversity is important at every table, and we want to create that bridge, create that access for underserved and overlooked folks, whether they're on the GP side or the founder side. I would say another thing, and I mentioned this earlier, we really appreciate the opportunity to be catalytic. So to come in early, make that early bet, help demonstrate that positive investor signal. And we're long-term partners. So on the fund side, we always go into an investment hoping to invest over multiple fund cycles. On the direct side, we often deploy our pro rata. So we want to be true partners and collaborators with our fund managers and with our founders.
Yeah, totally well said. Because bridging the diversity gap is really the first step in trying to empower your systems, right? In your specific role while you're implementing this investment thesis at Pivotal Ventures, how do you specifically ensure there is diversity in your GPs, LPs, and in the founders that they invest in return?
Yeah, this is so important to me personally. I think number one is about accessibility. Like I mentioned earlier, I try
Mhm.
to respond to LinkedIn messages. I often fail, but please reach out. And I
Yeah,
think that's so important in this industry that's so relationships driven, that has historically been more of a gated community, so to speak.
yeah,
I really want to be a gate opener. So I think that's number one in creating that access and approachability. And number two, I think, we're not in a vacuum. It's not just VCs and LPs, but they're ecosystem partners, affinity groups are doing such important work. We talked about VC Unleashed. I'm on the board of La Familia Foundation, which is a nonprofit that seeks to close the resource gap for Latin founders by bringing together founders, VCs, allocators, and other partners. So I think being part of this broader ecosystem of folks who are ultimately trying to diversify the ecosystem from the founder front, from the investor side, I think is really, really important.
yeah. You mentioned La Familia Foundation. I was just meeting with them a couple of weeks back as we started the
Oh,
new year.
amazing.
So we do have a lot of communities in common. I met their team in New York. We had a good morning. I would say instead of happy hour, we had more like a breakfast and coffee hour.
I love it. I love
So that was great. Yeah, yeah. And now that as Pivotal is entering the financial inclusion space, what type of companies are you looking to back and what KPIs are you prioritizing?
Yeah, so I think a couple subcategories, so to speak, that I'm particularly excited about today are within credit building. I mentioned that earlier, are
Yeah,
savings and debt management on the consumer side. And on the SMB side, I'm really hoping to make an investment in this kind of intermediary space, folks that are building to help facilitate lending to SMBs. So making sure that CDFIs, regional banks have the tools they need to more efficiently and more effectively lend to SMBs to make sure that SMBs have the capital that they need to grow. Main Street businesses are core to the health of our economy. And I think there's a lot of opportunity and a lot of folks building the space, to be honest. So I've talked to several founders in the space, and some are earlier, so we're just waiting for the right time as we invest Series A and B. But I think that's a really great use case for AI in the fintech space, at least in the kind of, we call it B to small b, businesses
yeah,
serving small and medium sized businesses. Using AI to analyze imperfect data, the smaller the business, and this goes back to
yeah,
my microfinance
yeah,
days, right? Like, generally speaking, the smaller the business, the less perfect the data is, right? But if there's a way to utilize AI to more efficiently go through cash flow data, to try to remove some of the bias that's inherent in the lending process, I think that's a huge opportunity to leverage AI for the benefit of both SMBs and the financial institutions. So really excited about that space, and hoping to make a bet there this year.
no, I totally agree. And I have done some work in all of these sectors as well. So we spoke a little bit on credit building earlier. I would like your definition of from a individual investment space. You mentioned savings and investment hygiene, right? So what exactly do you mean by that? Is it like you are going to ensure regular people, the 99%, is able to save more, reduce expenses? What does it mean?
Yeah, so there's a variety of companies innovating in these spaces, right? On the credit building side, it's um, any company that's helping folks, whether they are young adults and don't have credit history, or recent immigrants
Yeah,
and have credit history, helping folks build their credit and position themselves for long-term financial resilience and hopefully prosperity, right? We know how important it is to have a credit score. It unlocks access to student loans, to mortgages, all these things in our
mhm,
financial system. So companies that are using alternative data, for example, historically our credit is built using credit cards, right? Using car payments, things that are traditionally been reported to the credit bureaus. But there's a ton of companies innovating in the space, using rent reporting, using even how often folks are paying for their utility bills and subscriptions on time. So really
yeah.
making sure that these smaller transactions are also counting toward building credit. On the savings side, I think it's companies that are helping incentivize and educate folks to save. This is an age-old problem, right? Everyone
Yeah.
says they want to save, and then because of who we are as humans, it can be challenging at times. So it's definitely a tough space, but I think there are folks that are using, what we know about behavioral economics to try to encourage folks and incentivize folks in the right direction, where I think historically as a country, credit card debt has been the way to go. Like, you're incentivized to pay with a credit card. You can get miles, you
Mhm.
can get points, but we don't
Yeah.
historically incentivize good financial behaviors.
Yeah. And as we are in the start of a new year, everyone has a resolution to save more, reduce expenses. But by the time you're in few months down the line, they
Yep.
don't really keep up with it. So if we are able to help them have micro habits that can really sustain them throughout the year, not just at the start of the year, that will be really helpful for younger generation, right?
Yes.
And
Yes.
on the lending side, you mentioned providing more access and empowerment to lending SMBs, especially B to small b and small medium b, right? We spoke about perfecting the data you also mentioned, and I am very well also into that space. Sometimes there is no data. It's not about perfect data. There is data that needs cleanup. Quality of data needs to be aligned for a better model that's less biased. Sometimes there is no data also. Is that also something in your consideration when you're talking about alternative data and lending access?
I think there's always data. It's just about whether it's data that's been historically acceptable. So again,
Uh,
back to my microfinance roots, we would ask questions about their neighbors, about how much inventory they had, about what how much they sold on an average day, and we would use that to back into an analysis and ultimately an investment decision, right? Whether we were going to give them access to a loan. So I think back then, I was making $50, $100 loans, and you had to get really creative and use a lot of qualitative data. But there was data, you just had to like shift your approach, shift your kind of preconceived notions about what good data is and what bad data is. So I think, for example, the credit building examples I gave, using a utility bill or a Netflix subscription as a way to build
mhm.
credit, that's something we haven't done historically, right? That's a new
Yeah.
approach that's more accessible. And I think with lending to small businesses, it's important to get creative and make sure you're using the data that they have, because I don't think there's, when we think about innovation, when we think about advancing social progress and access to financial services, it's imperative that we think differently about it.
Yeah. My takeaway is there is always data. Are you using it in the right way
Yes, I
to
love that
enable
phrase.
access, right? Yeah. No,
Yep.
thank you so much for that. Now that in the financial inclusion space, as Pivotal is getting into this, what are top three areas that you will differentiate yourself to attract institutional funds and individual entrepreneurs? Not necessarily the areas in which you are investing in the financial access space, but what would be your three differentiators where you can attract more institutional and individual investments?
So I think one of our superpowers as an organization is that we have this dual mandate. We invest in funds and we invest in companies. And I think over the years, that has allowed us to develop relationships across the VC ecosystem. And I also talked about some of the VC partners, ecosystem partners we have, like La Familia Foundation. So we have touch points across the venture landscape. And I think that empowers us to really support our founders, our GPs, make introductions when necessary, even help folks collaborate, right? When we meet fund
Mhm.
managers that have similar theses, we say, hey, you two should know each other, and perhaps you can make some magic together through co-investments. Or founders, similarly, helping them connect the dots and explore ways of collaborating. So I think our network is a huge differentiator. I would also add our platform. We have a phenomenal comms team that supports our GPs and founders, whether it's a press release for a fundraise closing, whether it's announcing a new initiative. But I think they're able to collaborate with our partners in a way that helps with brand building and really amplifying their company or their fund strategy. Um, so I think those are a few of the like pivotal differentiators and how we position ourselves as a firm.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, especially the lost art of introductions, right? So you connect with people when you want something, but sometimes people don't think, oh, hey, I know two people, they can do great things together, let them be connected. So
It's
that's
literally my favorite
something
thing.
I,
Connecting people is one of it brings me so much joy, especially when they hit it off. I remember a year ago, maybe more, there were two GPs based in New York who had relatively similar theses, and both of them were really early days. They hadn't had a
Mhm.
first close, and I introduced them, and they emailed me and they told me, "Oh, we're actually going to collaborate. We're going to work together." And I was so excited for them, just knowing that I was able to help put the puzzle pieces together, and then, like I said, they go off and make their magic.
Yeah, it's your indirect contribution to the society to make impact. I think, yeah, I love that because I try to do that as much, but then sometimes we need to do that on a large scale for everyone to mutually connect and collaborate, right?
Yeah.
Now, I know we started with your early background. We got into a little bit of your experience with how pivotal your role and how can people get into this and what's the current focus in terms of financial inclusion. Now, where do you think your personal mission has evolved since the early days of your investing roles into your current impact investing initiatives? Has that evolved, stayed the same? What has changed? What has not changed?
I think the way I do the work has evolved, right? I'm not out in rural Malawi giving a $50 loan, but I am doing similar work in that I'm continuing to provide access to financial services, to financing that folks have historically been excluded from, right? So I see that as a through line in the work. I find it a huge privilege to be in a seat where my day to day work is so closely aligned with my personal mission. Ever since I was in high school and college, I wanted to create a world where there was greater opportunity and greater access. And again, I didn't have the vocabulary then, I didn't know exactly what that would look like. But I looked around and said, this isn't right, this isn't fair. What can I personally do to make things more fair, more equitable? So from microfinance to impact investing, even dabbled in social entrepreneurship. For me, it was really about how do I create a world that's more accessible and more equitable. So with this financial access strategy in particular, it like deeply resonates with my personal experiences. You know, growing up, I benefited a lot from things like financial aid to attend private school, college, graduate school, merit-based scholarships, things like that. So for me, it's about funding companies that, particularly on the B2C side, are helping empower families like mine, families where, you know, paying rent was difficult, where there was no safety net, financial safety net, and really making sure that we can change that. And I think there's a huge opportunity for companies within the fintech space to be part of that story.
Yeah, I mean, we cannot stress enough the importance of providing opportunity. It's not about providing um, funds or even aid. It's even trying to provide that opportunity or access for them to be visible and available, right? So really resonating with that. And I know we can keep talking. I see a lot of synergies, but then we're also coming up time. Is there anything else you'd like to share with our audience today before we wrap up? And also, please let us know how can people get in touch with you and Pivotal Ventures.
That's exactly what I wanted to share. Thank you. If you're a new fund manager, if you're a founder at the seed or Series A stage, please reach out. My email address is first name dot last name, no hyphen, at pivotal.com. And like I said, I try to be responsive on LinkedIn, so please reach out. And then one last plug on the fintech side. If you're building for financial resilience for families and small businesses, please reach out.
Thanks so much, Renata, for taking time. I can't wait for our audience to hear this and connect with you. Thank you.